The storm arrived without mercy. Snow fell in endless waves, thick white blankets burying the roads, bending trees under the crushing weight of ice. The wind howled across the small town, carving drifts that grew higher by the hour. To anyone looking outside, the world had become a wasteland of white, silent, cold, and unforgiving. And yet, inside a tiny time-worn house perched on the very edge of that town, there was movement. A faint glow pulsed through frosted windows. The crackle of fire whispered against the roar of the storm. That house belonged to Rosa Moreno. Rosa was not wealthy. She was not powerful. She was not the kind of person anyone would expect to make headlines or change lives. She was simply a housekeeper, quiet, hard-working, living paycheck to paycheck. Her possessions were few: a bed, a table with mismatched chairs, a cabinet holding the last of her winter vegetables. What she had more than anything else was strength, a kind spirit, and an unwavering belief that no matter how little she had, she could always share. That morning, she had risen early despite the storm. She swept her porch, though the snow returned the moment her broom touched the ground. She cooked a simple pot of stew, using the last carrots, potatoes, and onions she had left. She thought the day would pass in silence, just her and the wind. But Rosa was wrong. Before the day ended, her humble home would shelter not just herself, but 15 millionaires who had nowhere else to go. And this, dear friends, is not a fairy tale. It is a story about how kindness, even from the most ordinary hands, can echo further than we ever imagine. The storm brings unexpected guests. By noon, the blizzard had cut off the main highway that wound past Rosa's house. Visibility shrank until travelers could see no more than a few feet ahead. Cars pulled to the side of the road, their headlights swallowed by the snow. One by one, they appeared near Rosa's fence. First a sleek black Mercedes. Then a silver Bentley. Then a pearl-white Range Rover. Soon, the narrow lane outside her home filled with luxury vehicles, each one more dazzling, and more out of place, than the last. Rosa stood at her window, stunned. Who in their right mind would be driving such cars in weather like this? When the doors opened, her disbelief grew. Men and women stepped out dressed in fine wool coats, elegant leather gloves, polished shoes that sank instantly into the snow. Their clothes screamed wealth, but their shivering bodies revealed something else: fear. They clutched their phones, trying to find signal, but this far out, the screens only showed no service. For a moment, Rosa hesitated. Her cottage was small, barely enough for herself. She had only one pot of stew, one loaf of bread, and blankets already worn thin. What could she possibly give them? But then she saw a woman in a fur-collared coat, shaking so violently she could barely stand. Rosa's decision was instant. She threw open the door and called out over the storm, "Come inside before you freeze." The housekeeper's hearth. The millionaires looked at her with disbelief. These were people accustomed to five-star hotels, roaring fireplaces in penthouses, and staff waiting to serve their every need. And here was a woman in a modest dress, standing in the doorway of a tiny cottage, offering them refuge. But the wind howled around them, and pride meant nothing against the cold. One by one, they stepped inside. Rosa apologized for the cramped space, for the mismatched blankets she laid across their shoulders, for the stew that barely filled the pot. But no one complained. In the glow of the fire, with snow rattling against the windows, her cottage became a haven. Rosa gave up her bed so that the oldest among them could rest. She brewed tea with the last of her herbs. She offered slices of bread she had been saving for the week. And when the lights flickered and darkness pressed against the glass, she sang softly in Spanish, her voice wrapping the room in calm. And as she moved among them, something remarkable began to happen. Millionaires remember humanity. The guests, so used to being served, now sat cross-legged on Rosa's worn carpet, their expensive watches catching the firelight. Their conversation, stripped of business and status, turned to something far more human. They spoke of childhood memories, of the parents they missed, of regrets buried under years of success. One confessed how wealth had never protected him from loneliness. Another admitted that despite having a mansion, she had never felt at home. Rosa listened, never judging. She poured tea with tired hands and smiled with gentle eyes. She reminded them of something they had forgotten, the comfort of being cared for without expectation. By morning, the storm eased. The road slowly reopened. The millionaires rose, buttoned their coats, prepared to leave. Rosa asked nothing of them, not gratitude, not money, not promises. Only that they drive safely. As the last car disappeared down the snowy road, she sighed. Had she done enough? Would they even remember her? She didn't know. But fate had a surprise. The echo of kindness. At sunrise the next day, Rosa heard engines. At first one, then another. By the time she stepped outside, she froze in shock. 10 cars. 20. 50. More. By the time she stopped counting, 135 cars lined the road outside her home. From them stepped men and women in tailored coats and elegant suits. Each carried something: boxes of food, bags of clothing, blankets, envelopes. Movers unloaded furniture, heaters, and appliances. Men with shovels cleared her driveway. Children handed her flowers. Word had spread overnight. The 15 millionaires Rosa had sheltered had told their friends, partners, and colleagues. They had spoken of the housekeeper who had given everything she had, asking nothing in return. And together they had returned, not empty-handed, but with gratitude in every form they could imagine. They filled her pantry with food that would last months. They replaced her broken furniture with new. They carried in appliances Rosa had only ever dreamed of owning. Envelopes heavy with checks were placed in her trembling hands, some marked with more zeros than she had ever seen. But more than wealth, they brought a promise that her life would never again be defined by scarcity or loneliness. Yes, you do. Neighbors peeked through frosted windows, stunned at the sight of luxury cars lining Rosa's lane. Children pointed as businessmen in fine suits carried in boxes. Women in fur coats shoveled snow. The entire scene looked impossible, as though the world had tilted. Rosa stood in her doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks. Overwhelmed, she whispered, "I don't deserve this." Every face turned toward her, and in one voice they answered, "Yes, you do." That night, Rosa's home glowed with warmth. Cushions softened her chairs, baskets of fruit filled her kitchen. Her living room, once quiet and bare, rang with voices and laughter. Rosa had not asked for any of it, but she had given everything she had when it mattered most. And because of that, her life had changed forever. The power of kindness. This, dear friends, is the power of kindness. A single act, small, uncalculated, given freely, can ripple outward until it transforms not just one life, but many. Rosa thought she was feeding 15 strangers. Instead, she ignited a chain of compassion that returned to her 100-fold. Her story reminds us of something vital. Kindness does not belong only to the rich, the powerful, or the privileged. It belongs to all of us. And sometimes, the most powerful kindness comes from those who have the least to give. A call to action. If Rosa's story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the goodness still alive in this world, please take a moment now to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. These stories live on through your support, and together we can spread hope farther than we ever dreamed. And before we close, I have a request for you. Drop a comment below and tell us, what is the greatest act of kindness someone has ever shown you, or that you've shown another? Your words may inspire someone else to believe again. Closing. So Rosa Moreno's story does not end with the silence of a storm. It ends with the roar of engines, the echo of voices, and hearts united by compassion. She began as a housekeeper, with little more than a warm fire and an open door. But she became something greater, a reminder that even in the coldest storm, kindness is the light that guides us home.